Are we? No idea.
Oh, it is televised.
To meeting 103 of the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology, where we are continuing our statutory review of the Copyright Act. Just for everybody's information, we are televised today, so say hi to everybody in TV land. Wave. Today we are joined with from the Association of Canadian Publishers, Glenn Rollins, President, and Kate Edwards, Executive Director. Welcome. The Canadian Federation of Library Associations, Victoria Owen, Chief Librarian from the University of Toronto, Scarborough, and Catherine McColgan, Executive Director. From the Writers Union of Canada, John Deegan, Executive Director. And finally, from Colleges and Institute Canada, Denise Amiot, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Mark Hanna, Associate Dean, the Business School, Humber Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning. We're going to start off with the Association of Canadian Publishers. You each have 7 minutes per organization, up to 7 minutes. So that would be Mr. Rollins. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Glenn Rollins. I'm President of the Association of Canadian Publishers, known as ACP, and co-owner and publisher of Brush Education in Edmonton. I'm joined by Kate Edwards, Executive Director of ACP. We acknowledge that we're meeting today on the unceded traditional lands of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. ACP represents almost 120 Canadian-owned English-language book publishers across Canada, active in print and digital in all genres for audiences around the world. Canadian-owned publishers publish roughly 80% of the new books by Canadian authors each year. We're risk investors and creative partners in books. We fill the role in the book world that film producers fill in the film world. Copyright has immense importance to our businesses, to Canadian creators and creative industries, and to our shared project of being a unique and important country on the earth. We've been damaged by the Copyright Modernization Act. We're not asking you to turn back the clock. We're asking you now to unleash the unique contributions to Canada that come from our sector. It won't happen if you don't fix our marketplace. That means, first, clarify fair dealing for education by ending unfair copying. Adding education as a purpose for fair dealing crashed an inexpensive, smoothly functioning system. Second, promote a return to collective licensing in the education sector. It works, it's simple. Third, increase statutory damages to discourage systematic infringement. Fourth, ensure that Canada meets its international treaty obligations. And fifth, promote the effective operations of the Copyright Board. I want to impress on you that this is not a zero-sum contest between copyright creators and copyright users. The rights you protect for me and my colleagues are not taken away from anyone. They are protected for everyone. We want readers. Readers want the works we create and publish. Real balance is when both sides win. That's what's desirable and attainable. The evidence of what actually gets copied in the education system came before the federal court in Access Copyright versus York University. It's come before the Copyright Board. The facts are the facts. Canada's schools, universities, and colleges pay for some of the things they copy beyond legal limits, but not all. Changing practices in classrooms have not changed the fact that they use our works far beyond legal limits without paying for them beyond those limits. That creates a free zone that we simply can't compete with. The evidence of whether Canadian publishers are damaged by unfair copying has been tested in federal court, and the decision is that we have been damaged. Those facts will not change on appeal. I need to say as clearly and as bluntly as I can that if you don't intend the damage, You need to take a leadership role in stopping it and reversing it. As a working publisher, I'm disappointed that the damage we predicted before the amendment in 2012 came to pass. I'm disappointed that our government then asked us to prove the damage through studies, and when we did, they asked us to await the decision in Access Copyright versus York. And when we did that, they asked us to wait for the results of an appeal. Now we're asked to wait for the results of this review, and we may then be asked to wait for the results of an election. My colleagues and I are suffering real-time damage triggered by this act. Graduates of Canadian colleges and universities are losing opportunities to make a living in creative professions. But the necessary changes are completely in your power. Much good and no harm will come from them. Fair payment for valuable contributions to their education does not harm Canadian students. It helps secure their future success. Published resources are not driving the high cost of education. Collective licensing in particular is probably the biggest bargain in education. It offers the whole world of copyright-protected works for a few dollars a year, avoiding all kinds of other costs. One more important topic, I don't have the time or the community authority to properly address the topic of Indigenous copyright, but it's important for this group to recognize that Indigenous peoples in Canada stress the importance of compensation when it comes to using traditional or community knowledge. Last, I encourage you to think of Canada's copyright-reliant industries and professions as a sector that should grow and thrive and make its unique contributions to our national project, our national character. We create IP, we support community, culture, and education. We're part of the future. Support us and we'll contribute far more than we cost. We look forward to your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Before I proceed, I was remiss in, we have a new member here, Mr. Clark. Welcome to INDU and Copyright.
C'est un plaisir d'être ici pour remplacer M. Bernier.
It gives me pleasure to be here to replace Mr. Bernier. I'm very happy to hear about these issues with which I'm not quite familiar yet. Thank you.
The chair of the Heritage Committee, Julie DeBrusen, welcome today, and we look forward to hearing your comments. We're going to move now to the Canadian Federation of Library Associations. Ms. Owen, you have up to 7 minutes.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président,
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chairs, and committee members. Thank you for inviting us to speak with you this afternoon. My name is Victoria Owen, and I am the head library at the University of Toronto in Scarborough. I represent the Canadian Federation of Library Associations.
Executive Director of the Canadian Federation of Library Associations. CFLA is comprised of national, regional, and provincial library associations that represent Canadian libraries and archives. Libraries have a societal role to provide equitable access to information and preserve knowledge. In Canada, the Copyright Act recognizes the unique function of libraries to achieve the government's public policy objectives around research, innovation, and lifelong learning through the Act's exceptions and limitations. CFLA applauds Canada for steadfastly maintaining the copyright term of life plus 50 years established in the Berne Convention. CFLA also praises Parliament's 2016 amendment for the creation of alternate format works for persons with perceptual disabilities in compliance with the 2013 Marrakesh Treaty. CFLA is quite satisfied with the fair dealing exceptions in the Act. With the 2012 modernization, Parliament confirmed fair dealing and added new purposes for education, parody satire, and user-generated content. Decades before the 2012 amendment, the shift to licensed rather than purchased content and the massive increase in the use of freely available digital materials was well underway. Some argue that the 2012 amendments contributed to a decline in Canadian publishing. This is a flawed argument. First of all, Canadian publishing industry is not in decline. In fact, Statistics Canada reports a profit margin increase from 9.4% in 2012 to 10.2% in 2016. Secondly, Public and academic libraries invest heavily in electronic materials, and the libraries have paid upfront for all the permitted uses. For example, at my university, where the licenses or fair dealing do not cover use, transactional licenses are paid. In 2017-2018, the University of Toronto Libraries paid more than $285,000 in transactional licenses. This is over and above the $27.7 million spent on acquisitions, 75% of which are spent on electronic resources. Fair dealing promotes innovative interactions that create new works and contribute to the economy. In the digital environment, content in libraries is acquired under license. This often means that clauses in a contract override fair dealing uses and other statutory rights. Interlibrary loan may be prohibited, and Canadians may be unable to print an excerpt of a work. The Copyright Act should prevent contracts from overriding exceptions and limitations which undermine citizens' statutory rights and public policy goals of education and research. CFLA believes that the principles in the Copyright Act should be applied consistently. The 2016 amendment to ratify the Marrakesh Treaty permitted the circumvention of digital locks to achieve access for people with a print disability. Technological protection measures disadvantage digital works. In order to exercise statutory rights, CFLA recommends that the Act be amended to exempt exceptions for libraries, archives, and museums from the prohibition on circumvention, including fair dealing uses. The law should be clear that it is only illegal to circumvent digital locks for the purposes of copyright infringement. With most government information exclusively distributed over the Internet, researchers, libraries, and archives must be assured that making copies of digitized and born digital government works for preservation and dissemination does not violate copyright. Copyright on federal government publications, Crown copyright, should not apply to works that the government has freely made available to the public. Canadian libraries are working towards reconciliation and may hold Indigenous knowledge through research, appropriation, or with the participation of Indigenous communities and authors. Canada must be consistent with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. CFLA recommends that Canada acknowledges the rights of Indigenous peoples to maintain, control, protect, and develop traditional knowledge and cultural expressions within our intellectual property regime, and incorporate access, use, and protection by developing appropriate protocols with Indigenous peoples. Canada has achieved balance in the Copyright Act by granting extensive economic rights and moral rights to creators and copyright owners, and by granting limited exceptions to these economic rights to users and libraries and cultural institutions. These exceptions serve the public interest, advance public policy goals, and fuel Canada's innovation and economy. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much. We're going to move right to the Writers' Union of Canada. John Deegan, you have up to 7 minutes, sir.
Thank you. And thank you all for serving as part of this review of the Copyright Act. Canada's authors have been waiting a long time for the Copyright Act to be repaired. It's been a painful and expensive wait for us. I am an author. I'm here representing myself and the 2,100 members of the Writers' Union of Canada. I'm also chair of the International Authors Forum in the UK, which represents close to 700,000 writers and visual artists around the globe. The world's authors are also watching this process with great interest and considerable anxiety. We now know that the 2012 imposition of education as a category of fair dealing has delivered none of its intended benefit and has caused exactly the kind of economic damage many of us predicted. Students now pay more for their education, teachers are less able to legally access works, and much more likely to end up in court. Meanwhile, those who provide the work, education copies, Canada's writers, have suffered a disastrous income decline. Fully 80% of our licensing income has simply disappeared because schools now copy for free what they used to pay for. These are facts that may be ignored by some, but they're indisputable. Before the 2012 amendment, Parliament was promised there will be no loss of income for people who are in the creative economy, and that the education system pays for licenses in copyright and will continue to do so. These are direct quotations from educational testimony in 2011. Authors are regular guests in classrooms across the country, and many have personally witnessed beleaguered teachers photocopying an improvised free class set of materials, sometimes entire books. This is happening. Despite all the education technology promises and vagaries about disruption, open access, and the changing landscape, Canadian students continue to be fed a steady diet of photocopied and scanned excerpts from copyright-protected works. You've recently heard from educational representatives that they continue to pay copyright licenses. To be clear, they continue to pay some licenses, mostly for expensive foreign journal content, but they are not paying the reasonable and affordable collective licenses of Canada's commercial authors and publishers. Each year in Canada, over 600 million pages of published work is copied for use in educational course packs, both print and digital, and the education sector is essentially claiming all of that work for free. That is the real-world result of education's copying policies. Those same policies have been thoroughly discredited by York University's copyright infringement loss in federal court, and yet are still widely in use by school boards and post-secondary institutions across the country. Canadian schools and education ministries are now actually suing Canadian authors through our collective in a desperate attempt to reestablish the ground they lost in the York case. As a result of all of this, many Canadian authors have simply called it a day and stopped creating works. I ask you, are these the outcomes Parliament desired in 2012? Canada's authors embrace the future. We don't fear innovation, disruption, or the natural evolution of the marketplace. We lead those things. We create mobile literatures and cross-platform multimedia work that is stretching and expanding the definition of the word book in exciting ways. I myself do most of my creative writing on my mobile phone. But we've all learned a lot about digital disruption in the last 6 years. The scandalous misuse of private data by online platforms is not unrelated to the crisis of unfair copying of creative content. Both arise from a free culture ethos that counsels taking first and asking for permission later, if at all. This devalues the work of creative professionals. Most other nations have wisely resisted the siren call of free culture. Canada, sadly, is the outlier. Right now, Canada's writers and publishers have authorized and directed our collective to design a blockchain-enabled rights management system. That is real Canadian innovation, but it won't succeed without a clear, strong law at its back. Authors are investors in education. Most of us have advanced degrees, we all pay taxes, and many of us are or soon will be paying our children's tuitions. My own annual access copyright check used to go directly into my kids' RESPs. That's pointless now. Our labor creates the content so often copied by our schools. We do not deserve this unfair dealing. The solution is simple, and it's truly fair. Remove education as a category of fair dealing and require collective licensing for educational copying. The word education has been in the fair dealing section less than a decade, and all it's done is cause damage and clog the courts. The existence of a reasonable, regulated, collective licensing structure is the access solution favored by most of our global partners. It should be ours as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, we're going to move to Colleges and Institute Canada. Ms. Amiot.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you for your invitation to appear before you today. My name is Denise Amiot. I am the President and Chief Executive Director of the Colleges and Institutes in Canada, and I'm accompanied by Mark Hanna, who's the Associate Dean of Humber Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning, which is the largest college in the country.
Basically on the ground. So first of all, I want to recognize that we are on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. First, I want to say we appreciated Mr. Remy's remarks of last week when he highlighted the responsibility and role of all stakeholders to contribute to the dialogue during this review. And this is a prime example today. Colleges and Institutes Canada and its members recognize the importance of both creators and users' rights. This study is an opportunity to build on advances brought forward by Bill C-11, the Copyright Modernization Act, and to further contribute to an innovative economy in Canada by supporting learning, knowledge, creation, and strong creative industries. Colleges and Institutes Canada represents Canada's publicly supported colleges, institutes, cégeps, and polytechnics, and is an international leader in applied education and innovation. CICAN's members offer more than 10,000 different education and training programs to a broad range of 1 million students comprised of recent secondary school graduates, but also adult learners, Indigenous learners, New Canadians, international students, and university graduates. 95% of Canadians live within 50 kilometers of a college campus or one of our learning facilities. In 2012, Bill C-11 and a ruling by the Supreme Court of Canada fundamentally changed the copyright landscape. Although fair dealing existed, in fact, for centuries as a right prior to 2012, the inclusion of education as a fair dealing purpose and the Supreme Court's decision confirmed fair dealing as a much broader right than had been applied by the education sector prior. To help institutions govern fair dealing copying, our associations collaborated with the Council of Ministers of Education of Canada and Universities Canada to develop fair dealing guidelines. Since 2012, almost 90% of our members, excluding those in Quebec covered by Copybec, have adopted the guidelines or implemented new policies to manage copyright compliance. Colleges and institutes respect copyright and the importance of compliance. Consultations with our members indicate that they engage their staff regularly in copyright-related awareness raising and training. This has not reduced the purchase of materials. Quite the contrary, over 70% of our members have maintained or increased licensing expenditures since 2012. Statistics Canada reports that expenditures of print and electronic acquisitions for colleges and institutes have increased by 26% since 2012, and sales of educational titles for publishers in Canada rose by 5% between 24 and 26. The provisions of fair dealing drives knowledge creations by providing students and faculty with reasonable access to the content they need. Colleges and institutes offer a broad range of programming and credentials, such as upgrading diplomas, trades, degrees, post-diplomas, to a diverse student population, and they need a vast array of learning materials. So Bill C-11 also provided for the educational use of the Internet, which facilitates distance learning and access to education for rural, remote, and northern communities. Our members report that Internet materials are now the most commonly used educational resources, followed by videos and then textbooks. The educational world continues to evolve at a rapid pace, and advances in technology are having a profound impact on how our members deliver their programming. Learners expect quick, flexible, 24/7 access to learning materials. They have multiple devices and learn not just in the classroom, but from wherever they happen to be. There's a greater use of learning resources created by and for industry, open access publications, open data, sources such as Creative Commons and e-reserve systems in libraries. Industry requires nimble training programs that respond quickly to employer and community needs. Colleges and institutes work closely with business and industry to ensure that the curriculum is aligned with marketplace needs and provides students with work-integrated learning and co-op opportunities. Copyright legislation impacts teaching and learning and knowledge dissemination, confirming education as an explicit purpose of fair dealing, and making provisions for the educational use of the Internet contributes to the delivery of a 21st century education and supports learning in an innovative economy. The current copyright regime is working well for our constituency, and we believe it strikes a good balance that respects the law and jurisprudence. In its review, we urge the government to ensure the legislations will not only deal with the realities of today, but also be flexible enough to address what changes might occur in the future. As an important step towards reconciliation, we also recommend consultation with Indigenous communities to work towards the protection of Indigenous knowledge. Thank you for the time you are investing in this important topic. Our association and its members are prepared to assist the committee in its work. Alors, nos membres sont naturellement prêts à vous appuyer.
Naturally, our members are happy to support you in your work, and I will be pleased to answer your questions. The same holds true for my colleague, Mark Hanna. Thank you, Madame Amiot.
Excellent testimony. I really appreciate it, and it's great to have some discussion ongoing here about the different perspectives. And I can tell you that my first question is going to go to Glenn. I have a number of friends that are in the creative economy, and including a sister-in-law who recently just published a children's book through a process, and it was amazing to see it unfold over time and how much time it takes for an author to work with the various components from idea, through to writing it, to the working with the publishers and the illustrators, etc. And so we truly appreciate the need to have strong copyright laws to protect our creative economy and those working in it. So we also want to strike the balance of making sure that our educational institutions have the opportunity and the students have the opportunities that they need. So some of the questions I'm going to be asking is, in particular right now, I'll start with Glenn, is that you had mentioned a number of issues that you see currently with the fair dealing. In the context, though, of the educational sector, what would you see would be a reasonable interpretation of the fair dealing? So you talked about a lot of the problems, but if you could delve more into what you would see as a perceived solution for me.
The solution part, thanks for your question. The solution part, I think, is amazingly simple. I've grown used to hearing this over the years presented as a very complex issue. The solution is to relicense. Licenses that were in place before the amendment of the Copyright Act were low cost, and they covered the waterfront, including all the gray areas, and they offered a convenient way, and I would say a moral way, for users to make sure that the things they were using were compensating the people who created them. The thing that makes it so simple is that behavior hasn't changed. The guidelines, the unfair copying guidelines that were pushed out into the K-12 system and in the post-secondary system were based on the licenses. Some of the wording is borrowed from the licenses. And it means that behavior by professors, behavior by teachers, instructors, and students didn't have to change during that transition. The only thing that happened was that compensation dropped out. Adding compensation back fixes the marketplace, because it means that suddenly, instead of comparing a free system to a system that has a cost attached to it, any cost, you've got a balance, as you use the word, between potential uses. Some cost less and use less, some cost more and use more. I think that that's the balance we need to talk about, not a balance that suggests that when copyright's protected, that it somehow damages students. I think that, in fact, it supports them in their educations.
Okay, so my next question will be for John from the Writers Union, as somebody who's also an author. Same kind of question, if you could delve into it, but specifically, I'm going to, I read a press release where your organization referred to the 2012 amendments to the Copyright Act as highly contentious and poorly constructed, resulting in significant declines in educational royalty payments to authors, and called upon the federal government to prioritize an immediate fix. Do you have specific suggestions related to that particular statement?
First of all, well quoted. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, not to just repeat what my colleague Glenn said. Sorry, I'm hearing myself through my ear here. There we go. But the great irony, I think, of what happened in 2012 was it was intended, I believe, by Parliament to save students money and to give greater access to professors and smooth that process. Student costs have gone up since 2012 considerably. I've done a lot of research on this. There's lots of, especially in the student press, there's lots of indication that course packs, a sample of which I have here today, in some cases doubled in price. Now, why did that happen when there's no licensing and everything's being claimed as a fair dealing? Well, because somebody has to assess that fair dealing, and there has to be a centralized body within the university to do all that assessment. It slows down the process. There were times, certainly early on, and I'm sure it's continued, where professors were not able to get their course packs done in time for the start of class because of that bottleneck of fair dealing assessment. And the price went up because those administrative fees were larger than the $26 per student that was being charged through the Access Copyright License. And while I'm on the subject of the $26 per student, that's how it's calculated. That's not necessarily how it's meant to be paid. The bill goes to the educational institution. If they choose to pass that charge onto the student, that is their decision. I've done a lot of research on educational budgets, university and college budgets across the country. They can afford a license. For many of them, it's a fraction of 1% of their budget. So what we're talking about here is an efficiency. Licensing is an efficiency. It's cheaper and it works better than what we have now. So to me, that's the solution. Go back to licensing.
Thank you very much. Next question, Colleges and Institutions of Canada. Last week, Paul Davidson of University Canada asserted the university are spending increased amounts every year on purchasing content. Is that the same true for colleges and institutions?
I do have some statistics. The amounts are not the same. They differ of about $250, if I recall well. I'm trying to find the exact amount.
You can just submit that amount. But
yes, exactly. I'll submit
yes.
it. In fact, it's 26 Statistics Canada data shows that college and institute expenditures on library acquisition, both print and electronic, have increased by 26% since 2011-2012. You understand that in the college systems we use a variety of materials, as I said, and if I may, I beg to defer what John and Glenn mentioned earlier because fair dealing is not the reason for what is being expressed right now. The reality is that the learning landscape has changed, and it has changed tremendously. There's a shift now to use of digital content. Portals are built and paid for by institution and their faculty, group licenses to commonly used resources, faculty creating and sharing their own resources, open educational resources, Creative Commons, and publicly available material on the internet to create and share resources within the college systems. You know what? Learners, I'll just stop here, learners are demanding access
We're a little over time on
ways.
this one.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm sure we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
I'm sure we're going to come back to that. Mr. Generou, you have 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I may, before I begin on my questions, would just like to put on notice a motion, but not to be debated today, because we do have very esteemed guests here before us, and we have a lot of questions for copyright. So I'll read the motion into the record. The motion reads that the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology undertake a study over a period of 4 meetings to review the tax revenue losses to the federal government, including but not limited to royalties, personal and corporate income taxes and levies, as well as review the fiscal impacts, including loss of business and economic activity resulting from the construction delays of the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline. That the committee review the potential long-term federal benefits, including employment opportunities that the project would generate, and that the committee would report back to the House and make a recommendation as to whether or not the Government of Canada declare the Trans Mountain Expansion Project to the national advantage of Canada and invoke Section 9210C of the Constitution of Canada, which is particularly timely considering the initiative of funding the anti-pipeline activists through the Dogwood Initiative. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We have received your notice, and you can move on with your questions.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here today, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time here. I do want to talk similar to a line of questioning I had at the end of last committee that convened on Tuesday. It regarded the digital locks and TPMs. I'm hoping to direct those to you, Mr. Rollins, and you, Ms. Edwards, and perhaps Mr. Deegan, if you'd like to weigh in as well. Canada is bound by its international obligations under WIPO to prohibit the circumvention of technology protection measures, TPMs, digital locks. Given that TPMs are a source of some controversy in the education sector, which is protected by fair dealing, how does your organization suggest Canada can reconcile its obligations in favour of TPMs while ensuring education institutions can fully exercise their rights under fair dealing?
The quick answer to this, thanks for the question, from our standpoint is that TPMs for us were a major issue when we were talking in 2012. They've receded into the background at this stage. I think they're in many ways an issue that has been solved by technology and by relationship. We don't dispute the right of educational institutions to use materials they've purchased within the terms of the purchase, and we support the Marrakesh Treaty. We in general see TPMs as having a role in protecting copyright, and beyond that I don't have a technical answer to your question.
Okay. Mr. Ian?
Sure. My organization also supported the Marrakesh Treaty. However, we view TPMs as simply a business model, and the solution to accessing works behind TPMs is payment and licensing. And it's really that simple. In a licensing environment, the lock is unlocked.
Okay, thank you. Do also want, Mr. Rollins, during your opening statements, you mentioned clarifying fair dealing, and this is something we've heard from a number of publishers and licensing collectives. Hoping that you can clarify what clarifying fair dealings means to you.
I think that, again, when we were looking at the proposed amendments before they were passed into law, we raised the issue, particularly around the inclusion of education as a purpose for fair dealing, as being something that was lacking the good fences that make good neighbors. We have no differences with the project of education in Canada. We support it. We think that it's obviously a public good. We have been through it ourselves. We have kids that rely on it. We're not anti-education. But education is such a broad word, and it essentially replaced a similar phrase in the Act as it was private study. Education does open the opportunity for systematized, broad-scale, high-volume copying that was intended to avoid payment for work that was being used beyond legal limits. We saw the education sector, after committing not to abandoning licenses, we saw them abandon the licenses and immediately substitute a policy into this very large gray zone that was created by the very broad word, the inclusion of education, specific policy that looked to us curiously exactly like the terms of the licenses that were abandoned. So nature abhors a vacuum. We can't go back and turn back the clock. I wish we had been there with a policy before the education sector was, but that policy pushed out broadly in post-secondary and in the K-12 world essentially defined a practice as if it were defining law. I think this is the body, Parliament of Canada, that makes law, and I think that clarifying means substituting policy potentially or adding words to the legislation that make it very clear that what is not intended is systematic large-scale copying that seriously compromises the rights of the people who created the works.
Okay. Mr. Deegan, do you want to comment? Or
sure. I think I don't have a red light. Thanks. I think in an educational context, when I think of fair dealing, I think of a student going to the library and photocopying an article for research or private study. I have 2 degrees. I'm a bit older than the students of today, so I didn't have a lot of digital resources. However, I wasn't without digital resources in my time. I completed my education, for which I had a rather large student debt, with research and private study as my fair dealing options, and I felt unrestricted in that education. I really don't think, despite any technological advances today, that there has been a need for an expansion on that. What we're talking about when we're talking about fair dealing being applied to copying in schools is not the student going to the library and copying for research and private study. What we're talking about are essentially published books full of works that we have written and not given permission for to be sold to students. The permission comes with the license. We need to reapply the license.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Massey. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses being here today. No, I don't disagree that the cost of education has certainly not been related to this situation specifically. It might be part of the overall thing, but if we want to solve that problem, having no educational fees for university and post-secondary education would be actually probably a fair thing for students to do and would eliminate them as pawns between different parties and I guess the decisions of courts on terms of who pays for what and the materials for them to become educated, but that's for hopefully, I think a separate thing that we look at this is that it's almost a distraction in some respects because we want something we can control. One of the things I am concerned, though, is about the digital trends that are taking place and compensation, and then also, I guess the things that we can't see for the future. What type of models do you, has anybody looked at different models in terms of the other countries of what they've done? And maybe we can go, I have another question to follow up, we can go quickly around on that, maybe start over here and go quickly around to give us examples for this committee to look at.
So I did mention that we're looking at a blockchain-enabled rights management system, and that would be digital for sure. But just to back up a little bit, I know that we are in an age of technological advancement, and I know that education is changing. I have 2 kids who are heading to university in a couple of years, and I've been very involved in their education all along, so I've seen all the changes happening. I've also seen that in their backpacks are photocopies from kindergarten to where they are now in grade 10. So the digital shift is happening.
Yeah.
It has
can
not
you
happened.
answer the question, though? I have limited time here, and I'm just interested in if you looked at other models outside of Canada. Like, I don't want to be rude, but I only have limited time.
Sure.
Do you have any models outside of Canada from other countries in terms of how to deal with the change and then authors and other creators being compensated other than just Canada? That's what I'm looking for right now, and I'm sorry.
I think course management systems that were mentioned on the other side here are widely in use around the world, but in other jurisdictions they're in a licensing environment.
Can you name any countries? If you can't now, it's okay. I'm just looking to...
Sure, yeah, go ahead. Okay. Yeah.
Australia has for a long time had a comprehensive license that includes print and digital uses, and it is a negotiated rate between the education sector and rights holders. And I think what we want to emphasize is the content, regardless of format. And the Australian model is something that addresses that quite elegantly.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you for the question. I think in terms of changing legislation, we would look for flexible language so that there would be an interpretation. And I think the technological neutrality, so that we don't get stuck in the kinds of things we did with the digital locks, so that it applies regardless of the format of materials. So your statutory rights are secure in whatever format. I think Australia does have some very good new legislation. They did a review of their Copyright Act. They looked at, they had fair dealing, and I think they want to move towards fair use. So it's much more flexible. They have things they've introduced, they would think of introducing things like exceptions such as, so there's a broader interpretation. And there are many countries around the world who have contract override. They have, so I can give you the names of those countries.
Can you follow? Yeah, maybe follow.
And also the TPMs, that you can override TPMs. So yes, there are very good examples around the world for all of the things that certainly the CFLA has asked for.
Okay, and thanks. And if you could send them to us. And do you have anything? The reason I know that we have to create our own, but I'm looking for how also this fits with the bigger international picture later on, because it has been raised about how we're out of step.
I don't have a specific example of other countries, but I'd like to share something that hasn't been said yet with respect to a change that is needed.
Okay. Well, I just cut off a previous witness, okay. And I have one other question. I'm going to try to get both real quickly. And
no problem.
Because I don't want to be Mr. Rollins, I do want to touch with my time here. The study that was done for the province of Ontario, it had 3 recommendations and conclusions, and one of them wasn't to adjust fair dealing. So maybe you can highlight about perhaps why that was the case and a little bit more on the study. I thought the study was actually really good at introducing, I think, a lot of comprehensive arguments in the change of the digital world and the complications. But fair dealing was not one of the recommendations. Perhaps you can...
You know, I can't. I confessed at the beginning, I'm an Alberta publisher. I'm not familiar with the study. Perhaps Kate, my colleague, has a better handle on that.
Okay. So, yeah.
Is this the study that our association commissioned?
Yeah, digital trends.
So as background on that study, it was commissioned by our association to look at specifically opportunities for Canadian publishers delivering content through learning management systems at the K-12 level. The scope was much broader than that as we got started on the research and quickly found out that it would be useful to look at a broad range of initiatives that are underway. That was in terms of the recommendations that came out of the study, this was looking at initiatives that publishers could work on collectively in terms of new products, marketing, and so on. It didn't address fair dealing. That wasn't the mandate of the consultants who were hired.
I think it noted fair dealing, but it didn't. I just only had the 3 recommendations. How much time do I have left?
Sorry, could I just address that?
Pardon me?
I'm sorry to interrupt. That was a national study, so I was confused by the reference to it as an Ontario study. It wasn't a study of fair dealing or copyright. It was a study of digital opportunities in LMS marketplaces.
Yeah. I don't have. If our witnesses, you have 20 seconds each to add your stew. If you have a brief time to add, if you want to add something, go ahead there.
Oh no, I'm
I
good.
cut you off. Okay.
There's a legal model in the UK, if you're interested, which is fair dealing does not apply if a license is available.
Okay.
In education.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll try to come back with it.
I'm going to recommend, though, if there's something that you need to add that you don't have time, you can always submit it in writing to the clerk, as we're just trying to make sure we get as much information as we can. We're going to move to Mr. Bayless. You have 7 minutes.
Chair, when we talk about fair dealing, and there's obviously 2 different viewpoints here at the table, first thing I'd like to do is get an understanding of how much money we're talking about. So I don't expect you to have that answer here today, but if each of you could prepare for us, going back to 2004 or earlier, how much money you were or were not making, you were or were not paying for Canadian content. And I'm only interested in Canadian content to see. So for example, Mr. Rowland, you said it's cost you money. I'd like to know year by year how much it's cost you money. For the libraries and that, you might say, hey, we're paying more and more money. If you say that to us, then I'll come back and say, well, guess what? It doesn't cost you anything, so we'll get rid of fair dealing. That would be my recommendation. So I'd like to have an honest response from all of you. How much year by year are you saving, perceived to be saving, or perceived to be losing, so that we can put a bracket around this? Now, I'll start off with you, Mr. Rowland. You'd said that you're against fair dealing completely, but I assume if someone had to copy 1 page of a tome or something like that, you're not against it. Is there a percentage or some form of fair dealing that you could work with, or nothing goes?
No, I would have to say I believe in fair dealing. I think most copyright creators are also copyright users, and we're not looking for a world where there's transactional clearance of every use of copyright. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't recognize the rights of a user. What doesn't recognize the rights of a creator is large-scale copying that effectively prejudices the interests of the creator.
What would be fair to you?
There is, I'm sorry to say this, but there is in my mind no bright line. Every work is different. A poem may be a matter of 50 words, and a textbook.
I understand that, but if we have to write something, you better it's got to be written in ink. So I need to have an idea of what you think can and can't. This doesn't work. Whatever's written, what can work?
What's there in the licenses is variously 10 to 20% of a work or a complete chapter. That works for me under license.
Can you repeat that? 10?
10, depending on the sector being licensed, 10% of a work or 20% of a work or a complete chapter. Those were the terms in the license. That's what's been named now in the unfair copying practices.
That would work for you?
I think that works as a licensed use.
Okay,
as a free use, it doesn't work.
Can I hold that thought? Ms. Owen, would that work for you, or that would not work, what Mr. Rowland has put forward?
Well, I think fair dealing is a public policy issue, and I think I think it's very problematic if you turn it into a bright line, because what the Supreme Court gave us in the 2004 case is the structure, the framework to do a fair dealing analysis, and it's a complicated thing. You know, is it for permitted use, and how do the 6 factors that they gave us, how do we apply them? And is it how much of the work, are there alternatives to the work? Can you buy it? There are many factors that go into it. So I think this is a public policy issue. You can shape it, but it should remain nuanced. Because it doesn't work. It doesn't work if you apply it to poetry or literature or scholarly works. So I think you need it to have.
So Mr. Rollins would say it should be harder, cleaner, and you say it can't be. Is that what I understand?
Well, I don't think it works. I don't think from the framework of public policy, I don't think it works that way. I think you have if there are infringements, the Copyright Act has the ability for people to sue for infringement. Then it goes before the courts, and then you do the analysis. There's the whole framework there that's already in place.
I don't know if Mr. Deegan, you have anything to add to that, or?
Sure. Just waiting for the red light. You seem to be looking for a number, and I don't know if I can provide a better number.
It doesn't have to be a number. I'm looking for something. You're not happy, if I understand what exists today. So what I need to at least understand, what would you be happy with? And they are happy. So is there a compromise, or there's no compromise? That's what I'm looking for.
I appreciate the question. I think maybe one of the areas that we actually agree on is that bright lines are very difficult in terms of numbers when you're looking at fair dealing. I would instead look at it in terms of a condition, and that condition is when an individual is claiming fair dealing. I think that the consideration should be fairly broad. When an institution or a sector is claiming fair dealing, I think the consideration should be as narrow as possible so as not to damage an established market. And that's what happened in 2012. A very broad exception was applied to a sector rather than to an individual, and our market was damaged, if not completely destroyed.
Understood. Madame Amiot, est-ce que vous avez quelque chose à ajouter?
Madame Amiot, do you have anything to add? It's an excellent question, Mr. Bayless. If you don't mind, I'll ask my colleague who works in the field to answer you, because he'll be able to tell you what works and what does not work.
I first have to say that I am concerned when our colleagues are referring to faculty institutions as copying sort of in an unlimited fashion, because everyone I've worked with and everyone I currently work with, the goal with all librarians and faculty is to respect copyright and to minimize the amount of copying. So that is, I think, the first point, because I think if the belief is that copying is happening in a very irresponsible way, then your question, really is key. But I think that if we can at least consider the possibility that it's not the case, that is not people are looking to copy widespread, and in fact are really trying to make sure we're not copying more than we should. At the same time, I would put the question to my colleagues that, let's say it was 5%. Are they saying that all the other trends that are happening in the industry wouldn't have had the same impact that they've had today? I don't believe that that's the case.
Fair enough. Is there something, and I'm interested in helping Canadian creators, not foreign creators, is there something as the users, either the library or yourselves, that you might see some creative idea of how we could be helping our Canadian producers, our Canadian authors and writers? Do you have any thoughts on that?
You have about 30 seconds to answer.
So after listening to the exchanges at the earlier meetings and trying to understand about the large numbers that seem to be missing from somebody's pocketbook and where they're coming from and where they're going and who's missing them, I begin to understand, libraries and institutions, educational institutions are paying more. It seems that Stats Canada is showing us that there's no harm being done to the publishing industry. Book sales in Canada are going up. So then I wonder so maybe we should look at what's happening within the industry of the distribution of that income. So that's opaque. Who can see that? So if we can't see it, we can't know where that's going and where the shortfall is. So maybe that's somewhere we could begin to have a look at that, things that aren't clear or transparent. That might be one way.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Lloyd. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. And if I'm too quick, I'll be splitting some of my time with Mr. Genereux. My first question for Colleges and Institutes Canada. You noted that you're spending more than ever on licensing. Can you comment if any of that Like, how much of your licensing budget goes towards Canadian content and Canadian authors?
I'll ask my colleague to talk about it because, again, he will give you a precise example of a college. And if you want the broader, I could give it to you after.
So first I will say that Humber College is proud. My colleague mentioned a 26% increase. We are proud to report a 50% increase since 2012 in terms of expenditures. So we're on the high end of that average. We do purchase quite a bit of Canadian content, and I have a list here which I can share with you, but I don't have a specific percentage, but I could definitely send that to the committee after the fact.
Can you comment on, like, do you pay Access Copyright any fees?
We don't license with Access Copyright currently, no.
And which other Canadian groups would you pay for copyright with then?
So, I mean, we have databases, Canada Context, Canada's Information Resource Centre, Grey House Publishing Canada. I mean, we have many, many Canadian resources that we license, yes.
And are those groups compensating writers and authors?
Well, all I know is the license that we pay. Would have no insight, as my colleagues mentioned, in terms of how the writers are paid.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question would be to the publishers, are these organizations that are receiving the licensing fees, are these organizations compensating your institutions and authors?
Without knowing more about the licenses, it's hard to be specific about that. But what I can say is that we're not, in some ways, we're talking about a distraction. If somebody says, I'm spending a lot of money here, but the evidence, when facts are examined in court or copyright board, the evidence says, well, you're not spending any of that money here. We should have a very simple discussion. That's what we're talking about. But instead, we're in a situation now where mandatory tariffs are disregarded and not paid, and where we have a licensing environment that has broken down because there is a misinterpretation, an unfair interpretation of fair dealing. In general, that money is not coming to us. Our members report that transactional licensing is almost non-existent, and the collective licensing revenue has almost disappeared. Access Copyright had its annual general meeting on Friday, and its revenue from K-12 and post-secondary is down 89%. And ironically, Canadian creators now from foreign educators get more licensing revenue than they get from Canadian sources.
Thank you. And I guess this question to John Deegan, would you call this an existential threat to Canadian content and Canadian culture in terms of creation in the future?
Absolutely. I have members who have contacted me to say that they're very sorry, but they can't pay their dues this year because they don't have the dependable revenue that they used to have. It's not a pension, it's payment for use. Their work is still being used. The payment has just disappeared. And so, yes, they're dropping out. They're saying, I can't do it anymore.
Thank you.
You still have a minute and a half. Great.
Thank you. In 2015, then Science Minister Ed Holder put forward a policy on public access for the granting councils, for NSERC, SSHRC, CIHR, that everything must be freely accessible within 12 months. Curious as to your, I'll ask College Institutes Canada to this first, your institutions and your organization's position on if this were to extend to private and the non-granted councils, but to other funding, research funding through government, if you'd be supportive of a policy such as that.
So first, as you know, with colleges, the applied research that we do not keep the IP most of the time. So your question is a very complex question, and I believe it's questions for government to decide, but in consultations with a variety of stakeholders, because there are different aspects to that. And at the end of the day, we need to look at what's in the best interest of the country. As principals, Canadians need better access to government-subsidized research, and we agree that all should be made available for free to the public. But there needs to be some exception, whether it is because sometimes it needs to be kept confidential for proprietary reasons, or if there are revenues that are attached. So I have to say yes in principle, but there needs to be some exceptions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, maybe we can come back to that. Okay. We're going to move to Mr. Longfield. You have 5 minutes.
I think it's missing. Are you up? Okay. I didn't realize I was next up. I'm enjoying the conversation, though. And I'm thinking with Ms. Amiot, we've got today being Intellectual Property Day, and we've got a new intellectual property regime. Colleges will be taking part in helping with the move out of the ideas from Canadian researchers. I'm thinking we have a similar challenge here in terms of managing our data in Canada, managing our information that we have. And I think we've seen from this conversation so far today that we don't really know the supply chain impacts all the way down. And I think part of this study will need to get into that more. Yeah. I'm very concerned, and I've been concerned in the last few meetings around Canadian content, and it was great that Mr. Lloyd was bringing that forward, because if we don't get access to Canadian content, then the researchers stop researching and we eliminate the value out of our value chain. Germany has been, this is a longer question, it's a lead up. Germany has looked at their regime and they're ready to turn it up. Well, they've proposed some major changes in Germany. I've been reading the Australian document from March 2018. They're talking about fair use with some specified exceptions. So where would we go we need everybody at the front of the table here to help us with how do we make this fair and reasonable for Canada in terms of managing the supply. I'm calling it a supply chain. So I apologize to the artists and creators, but that's where things start. So maybe if we could go right to left in terms of management of the supply chain, how we can understand better where it isn't working, because we've been trying for a couple of meetings now to get to the bottom of it.
I think I'd go back to my earlier comment about the difference between individual and sectoral use or industrial use. I think when we are talking about copyright in the context of industrial use, we have to consider markets. When we are talking about user rights, which is a fairly new term, I believe we have to consider individuals. And these are very different things, and they exist on very different scales. So when we're talking about 600 million pages of work that is copied every year in the educational sector, that's an industrial use. That needs to be a market.
Right.
Without it, my members are losing 80% of their licensing income.
So there's something that ties to volume.
Pardon me?
Something ties to volume then, in terms of regulation.
Absolutely. Something ties to volume, and something ties as well to administrative or industrial use. It's often conflated in the fair dealing debate that it's just a student doing a single photocopy. That's not what we're talking about.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll step in if that's okay. What I'd first like to encourage you to not do is think of copyright as something that's adjusted to keep cultural industries within the lines. We're supposed to do well. We're supposed to be tigers for Canadian culture and Canadian identity. And looking at
and if I can interrupt, and keeping value in Canada, in our economy, and
absolutely.
They're participants in the economy, the creators. Yeah.
The information economy, the local economy, national economy. So the key thing when thinking about adjustments is to attach value to payment. Doing that keeps a functioning economy, and when you break that chain, you break it. And that's why the principle of specialized exceptions only is so important, and why the constant attention to not prejudicing the rights of the creator is so important. If there's payment attached to value, it works.
Thanks. And both Australia and Germany have very definite exceptions that they've really worked on. Specifying, yes. Yeah. Libraries. Got 20 seconds.
So I think there are a couple of things to touch on here, and one is that I think the supply chain needs to be transparent. in how it's doing business. So things are very opaque right now. We have talked about that already. The second to supporting Canadian creators. There are other avenues I think that the government could be considering. We have the Canada Book Fund that's managed by Canadian Heritage. We also have the Canada Council for the Arts that manages a number of grants, strategic funds. They also manage the public lending rights program. I think these are areas where the government could look at increased sustainable funding that goes directly to the creators and sort of bypasses where we're talking about the publishing industry increasing and the creators' dollars going down.
Thank you very much. Out of time. We're going to move Mr. Clark. Vous avez 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, you have 5 minutes, sir.
I'd like to start off with, it seems it's very important to acknowledge ancestral ownership of territory. But it is very important for me to acknowledge present-time ownership of territory. So I would just like to say that we are in British North American territory, and that Ottawa is the capital of Canada that was chosen by Queen Victoria. And it's the capital of all Canadians, including Indigenous people, of course. I just felt I needed to say that. Thank you, sir. So I'm very enjoying this examination today concerning the rights of authors, because I think it goes profoundly to the roots of our liberal democracy. I see two major interests unfolding and competing today in front of me. That we can see two major paradigms. One is an ideal, access to knowledge, here, and the other is a legal principle from John Locke, of course, the protection of the property, which is at the base of what you're asking for, and which is very important. And so I'm hearing that in 2012, if I correctly understand what you're stating this morning, this afternoon, sorry, our goal here for parliamentarians is to carefully find the equilibrium between competing interests in democracy. And so it seems to me that you're telling us that in 2012, we perhaps put too much emphasis on the access of knowledge compared to the protection of rights. In this case, the authors, which is perhaps true. Perhaps we did that. But my question is this, if we reflect on it, way more Canadians presently are in need of access to knowledge than the quantity of people that you represent. And I'm not saying that to be rude or whatever, but you see, that's what we have to do here. And I'm just trying to understand why in 2012 we came to this kind of reasoning and conclusion. And also maybe it's just an oversight. We always do that here in House of Commons. It's normal, and that's why we always review things, and that's how it should work. So, but what you're telling us today is that we should change it because we didn't put emphasis enough on the rights and interest of authors. That's what you're saying, basically.
Question for me? Yeah.
Oh, well, the three of you.
Sure. I think what happened actually in 2012 and before 2012 is that a false dichotomy was introduced into the debate, which is the idea that, which you described, that users and creators are competing somehow over something. I'm a creator. All my members are creators. We are also users of copyrighted content. We've all been students. We're all engaged in this interaction with content. And so to set it up as a competition and to set it up as some sort of a seesaw where we have to have a perfect balance, I think is probably not the right way to look at this.
Okay.
I think what we need is something that works for everybody, but not necessarily something that works for everybody exactly equally at all times. If I'm a user as well as being a creator, that means there are far more users, as you said, far more users than there are creators. You put one giant group on one side of a seesaw and a small group on another side of a seesaw, and we're to the moon. And I just don't see that as a workable way of looking at it.
OK. Thank you very much. Good answer. Aussi, j'aimerais demander à Madame au bout de la table ici.
I'd also like to ask you what your relationship is with the Copyright Board. How would you define your relationship with the Copyright Board, Madame Amiot? Well, we don't have a direct relationship with them, but your members do, yes. Yes, our members. So what is their role? Well, we have members who are themselves authors, who are writers, who write books, who write articles. Even though the task of those who are working in teen colleges is principally to teach. So there is a nuance with post-secondary education in that sense. But we, as an association, do not have a relationship as such with the board, but those who write books do. I'll ask my colleague Mark whether he'd have a concrete example to provide you.
Our relationship with the Copyright Board?
Yes, please.
We are the recipients of their decisions, which we always await very patiently. That's basically it.
I see.
Yes.
Finished?
Finished.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much.
You have 2 minutes. Mr. Massey? Oh, sorry. You see, you guys got me all messed up. Mr. Bruthen.
All right.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. It's been a very interesting conversation. My first question is actually for the colleges, because Ms. Amiot, when you did your opening statement, you talked about how you felt that the right balance had been reached in 2012. And yet, I'm trying to reconcile that with what I'm hearing from the other side of the table, which is saying that they don't feel that balance. Yeah. So I'm wondering, given that you're telling us the right balance has been reached, how do you reconcile that?
Okay.
Because we're hearing different things.
It's a very good question. So I gave some numbers. I think I will reiterate them, if I may. When you know that about 70% have maintained or increased their licensing expenditures since 2012, plus we know that they have spend more in library acquisitions, both print and electronic, have increased.
If I could stop you, because the only reason is because I know that Mr. Bayless has asked for all of the numbers from everyone, and I don't have very much time. Yeah. But essentially, I just was hoping you could try and explain. Like, you just saying that numbers don't bear out what they're saying.
And I'll tell you, it's because the landscape has changed. Right now, we are only looking at things like if they were the same. If you look at the music industry, it has changed a lot in the last 5 years. If you look at the way we shop, it has changed a lot in the last 5 years. If you look at the way we listen to movies, it has changed a lot. We used to have to go somewhere, or we needed to go physically. But now, if you just talk to Humber, Mark was telling me that now 80% of their acquisition is things that are online.
But I guess some of the examples you're using are personal use and what we've been talking, and I think actually, if I've heard the Writers' Union, there's been a distinction drawn between personal use and institutional use, which is what they've been getting at.
It's the same.
The fact is, being reached differently, but there's still content that's being used in the classes. And that's what the concern is that I'm hearing over here. Maybe I'll skip to something else, but I'm not sure I've figured out how to reconcile it, because that's what's being asked of this committee ultimately. Yeah. But I've also heard a reference to 600 million pages every year being copied. I'm not sure, first of all, if you could tell us what the source is for that information, because that might help. Ms. Regan?
Sure.
Oh. Hello.
Yeah. So my understanding is that most of that number, or at least over half of that number, comes from the York trial. So we're talking about evidence. We're talking about actual testing of copying that happened on a university campus in Canada. And the rest would be what, historic from the license?
From submissions to the Copyright Board and assessments of the tariffs. So again, evidence-based, real copies made in Canadian institutions, and that has not changed in the last 5 years.
So I guess in going back to, and just to try and figure out how we go from there, because you said that you, if I heard Dr. Hanna speaking, said that you try very stringently to make sure that the copyright is followed in the way it is. So I guess, what do you say to that 600 million figure of copying, and what do you do to ensure that people in your institution are aware of what the rules are when they're copying?
So I can speak to that. So I think I can't speak to the 600 million pages, but I will say that, again, we are relying heavily on publisher content in the classrooms, and we tend to use fair dealing more as supplementary materials to add a different perspective to a particular topic. In terms of making our faculty aware, we actually started with an awareness campaign. We called it iCopyright, and we distributed toolkits and various educational materials. We followed that up by actual mandatory training, where we actually have a copyright module where faculty have to get 100% on that copyright quiz to be considered completed in terms of the training. And we also have a very robust library staff that I get to actually support with my background in intellectual property with more of the complex questions. So faculty, again, really want to make sure they're not outside of the law. So they will come to the copyright department at the college and ask, is this okay? Can we do this? And we take a very conservative approach. If we're not sure, we say no. If we think it's a gray area, we'll say no. So that has been our experience.
All right, thank you.
And now we'll go to Mr. Massey, who has 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. DeGen, I cut you off rudely before, but in the subsequent testimony, you did, the issue over Canadian content and culture here is really important. My concern is that even as we go through this process, even if there's a recommendation to break down the current copyright laws in place, time that actually would be tabled in Parliament and something would retabled and go through the Senate, we're probably outside this electoral cycle. What else can we do in the meantime if nothing changes? I mean, that's you're here, expressing, I think, very unique concerns amongst the parties.
Yep. Thank you very much for the question. We're well aware of the length of the timeline, and it's quite painful to us. I would say that the best quick fix right now would be the Copyright Board, speeding up the process of the Copyright Board and making the decisions of the Copyright Board clearly mandatory, which we believe they are already, but maybe carving that in stone for those who don't believe it, and putting statutory damages in place for non-compliance. Our relationship with the Copyright Board is very similar to the college's relationship to the Copyright Board, in the sense that we wait a very long time for the result, and our royalties are held in check until the decisions. Our relationship is slightly different in that we actually follow the rulings of the Copyright Board.
Could I have a question then recorded to our researchers? Perhaps we could get a analysis from them in terms of decision-making timeframes from the Copyright Board, maybe going back perhaps 10 years to perhaps even 10 years, 20 years. In terms of, that might be too much long, but I'll leave it to the researchers. But I'd like a little bit more of it to see if there's a trend in terms of copyright decisions. We've heard this enough from various witnesses. It'd be interesting to find out if that timeline has changed or whether or not that needs adjusting under the digital age that we're now emerged under. And I believe that's probably the end of my time.
Thank you. We're having so much fun. We're going to go a second round of 7 minutes, 7 minutes, and 7 minutes, and we will call it a day after that. So, having said that, Ms. Ng, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you so much, and for everyone for coming here and providing us with very helpful information. Maybe what I'll do is, there's clearly something that we're trying to, understand, and I'm hoping that through our testimonies we will be able to better understand and get closer and closer to unsurface, to surfacing what where that gap might be, so that we can indeed, continue the flourishing of Canadian content, which this country, which is so important to our country, and yet at the same time make that wonderful content available to to our young people and people in our institutions, because they so depend on it. But I'm going to go a little. I'm going to veer a little bit in my question. The universities and colleges and the institutions that are institutions of learning have these wonderful young people who go in and they use material and they learn from the material, and from there they actually they are innovating, they are creating new and additional products or digital innovations, and I don't even know what the future is, right? I mean, the answer is there's going to be a wonderful future, and a lot of that is actually done on using the very works that are created by authors and by writers and by many of our content creators in this country. So I would like to hear people's views as we look into the future. How do you look at this? I mean, in terms of the new work that is created, and how how do we achieve that? How do we achieve that balance? So there's no question that there's some gap. Not that there are gaps here, and I know that we'll get further in that in future in this and future testimony. But I also want to jump into the future and look at where we're going. So maybe I'll just sort of start. Mr. Deegan, how do you treat it? I mean, you've got these new people who are going to create something wonderful and new, but perhaps off of material from you and your members.
Yeah, what I would say is it's very hard to prove a negative, obviously, but what I would say in response to that is I think that there has been a suppression of creation of new work since 2012. That's very ironic and unfortunate, because in 2013, Alice Munro won the Nobel Prize, and the eyes of the world turned to Canadian writing. If Canadian publishers are doing very well right now, perhaps it's because that foreign sales have increased. I don't know for sure, but I'll let Kate answer to that. But for the world to be looking at us and inviting us, we're going to be the country of honor at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2020. For all of that to be happening at the same time that Canadian writers are feeling alienated from their own education system and in many cases unable to continue, I think is a very unfortunate situation for us to be in.
Thank you. Maybe we'll just keep going through.
Again, I think it's a really robust solution to attach value and payment. It's flexible, it encourages innovation. I'm always very worried when I'm asked to prove damage, because we've been through a period of 6 years now from the amendment of the Copyright Act that should have been no holds barred. We should have, by that I mean we should have been expanding, we should have been making a bigger contribution than we were able to make to the Canadian economy and to Canadian life. If you attach value to the use of value, if you reward the creation of value, you've got something that will respond to changes in technology, changes in buyer preferences, tastes in fiction. It's a very robust and flexible system. When you break that chain, and I worry when I hear that the solutions are the public lending right, for example, when you break the chain and say, no, we're going to you'll have an allowance, you'll be on an allowance and do your thing, and we're not a craft, we're a profession. We've earned our chops. We do what we do because it's valuable to us and it's valuable to others, and seeing that reflection in a return makes it possible for us to keep doing it and to adjust to the times.
Thank you. And to the others, please.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I think it's a great question. We saw in the 2012 amendments the addition of user-generated content. So I think that's something that addresses the future. We look at how people can use, rework, use material that is already there, riff off of it, and create something new. I think there are, so that's an exception. So I think it goes to the overall, the distribution of rights. So the majority of rights, nobody is disputing it, the majority of rights rest with the creators and the rights holders. But there is this little sliver of rights that are exceptions to those. And that's the area that we're talking about. It's limited. So it isn't the kind of threat that's being characterized. I also think that when we're looking at things like text and data mining, and I think the chief librarian at Ryerson University also brought this up, like what can we do with artificial intelligence in the future? So have a Copyright Act that's quite flexible and that can be creative. So I think you want it to be open to those kinds of creative opportunities that are protected and within the realm of intellectual property. Those are just some examples.
Thank you. And really quickly, because I'm going to share some time with my colleague David Lametti. So please, Dr. Hanna or Ms. Amia.
There's something very important that maybe some members around this table are not aware of. And I think as we move further, we need to be adaptable to changing technology, but we need to be inclusive. Why do I say to be inclusive? It's because we want to make sure that nobody is left behind. Do you know that now, and I will quote, that currently it is not permissible to break a digital lock, even to create closed captions, which is an accessibility requirement in many provinces, such as Ontario and other provinces.
I'm just
Therefore,
there because I think, David, you had wanted to get something in here.
Yeah, I mean, we get submissions from various people as part of the committee, and we have submissions from two small Canadian publishers. Broadview Press, they claim in their submission to us that their annual revenue is $3.5 million, and the drop in access copyright revenue for them is $30,000. That's a drop of less than 1%. House of Anansi, in their submission to us, say their annual revenue is $7 million, with a loss of about $15,000 to $17,000 in access copyright money in the education sector. And again, that's a loss of less than 1%, actually 0.25%. That seems to be a very different picture for small Canadian publishers in terms of their loss from access copyright revenues than we're being told, and that's in their very own submissions to us.
If I might also quote from Broadview's submission, Leslie Demma, the president, says, "The rise of copying as a substitute for the purchase of original works has caused a steep decline in Canadian sales revenue at Broadview Press. 55% of our revenue came from Canadian sales in 2013. This has dropped steadily, with only 41% of our revenue coming from Canadian sales in 2017. And if you read the brief, you'll see that they have shifted their focus to the American market, despite being very committed to Canadian authors, Canadian students, but there's not a market here for them to sell into anymore."
Maybe, but their access copyright revenue has dropped less than 1%.
Thank you. I'm sure that exchange could go on for a little bit, but we're going to move on to Mr. General. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think Mr. Bayless's line of questioning definitely echo that in terms of getting a lot of that information that Mr. Lametti was just looking for. I think that would be helpful for the entire committee. Do want to. There's so many questions, so little time here, guys. So thanks for bearing with us. Copyright Board would like your opinions around the table here on ways that could be concrete changes could be made, restructuring of it, what that would look like if you were given a free rein to structure the Copyright Board. We'll start maybe with Colleges and Institutes Canada.
Well, I mentioned that we were the patient recipients of their decisions, so I would say that their decisions can often have profound impact, especially if we're dealing with tariffs in terms of the expenditures that the college would have to anticipate. So it would be great if the board was better resourced to deliver decisions in a more timely manner.
Sorry, does that mean financially resourced?
Well, I think financially, which I assume would translate into human resources in terms of whether it be better, support for research or analysts, or I'm not sure what's always causing the delay, but the decision in terms of the consequences that are hanging in the balance are often pretty significant. So people.
Yeah,
basically, yeah.
Go ahead.
Hello. So the Canadian Federation of Library Associations did submit a brief to in the copyright board submissions. So we can refer to that and send it in again. I do think that one of the things that we would like to make clear is that I think that we are able to purchase content from a number of sources, and we should have the choice to be able to look at where we get our content from and how we negotiate those rights. So I think it is one in a variety of options that's available certainly for libraries, for academic libraries, for public libraries. It's just one of a suite of things that we can purchase.
So the question is specifically how we would address the copyright board. We've also submitted a brief, and the first recommendation in the brief is to appoint case managers to manage procedural issues and codification of case management rules and timelines. And the kicker is so that the process can be more efficient. It moves too slowly to really affect in real time our ability to produce materials. And the second is
Mr. Chair, just to note, there's agreement in the room here on at least something today. So very good. Yes.
I'll go beyond that. I think I agreed with about 90% of CFLA's statement. So I think we're all part of a culture of reading, and there's broad agreement, but there are some significant issues. The second is to address statutory damages available to collectives to encourage compliance with certified tariffs. At this point, enforcement proceeds infringer by infringer. It's an expensive process. I think Mr. Deegan also addressed this. We need a copyright board whose decisions are respected by the marketplace and treated as mandatory as decided in the Access Copyright versus York decision.
We have time for Mr. Deegan.
And I would just reiterate exactly that. We have certified tariffs on the books right now that are not being paid. So what is the point of having a quasi-judicial copyright board that makes these decisions if the decisions are not mandatory? As well, my personal experience with the copyright board was being asked to be a witness there in a tariff proceeding, and it was a tariff proceeding between the writing and publishing side and the educational side, and the writing and publishing side of the courtroom was full, and the educational side was empty because they chose not to show up and defend their position. So I think there is a real absence of enforcement, and that needs to be addressed.
Oui, Madame Amiotte, moi je voulais vous demander, depuis qu'il y a eu les amendements...
Since the amendments to the last Copyright Act in 2012, how beneficial was it for the millions of students in Canada? Did it really significantly increase their access to knowledge? Knowledge that is held by authors, for example. Well, I would say that the major change that was brought to knowledge since 2012, and I'm straying from today's topic, that's fine, is access to several sources of information, many sources of documents, films, speeches, to which people didn't previously have access. So there's a veritable explosion of information now for all programs, which means that for a teacher, it's most advantageous, since they don't just present their students with one perspective from a single book, but with information from several perspectives, many perspectives. So students are then introduced to a variety of ways of thinking, and these perspectives may come from a variety of cultures too. So that's very beneficial for education. But in the institutions you represent today, yes, the 130 of them, that means thousands of professors, of course, teachers. Do you think there are practices? Ethically speaking, are teachers trying to be careful as to the use they're making of the material? Have you conducted surveys amongst the teachers and professors to find out what their attitudes are when it comes to reproducing material or excerpts? Well, yes, that we have conducted surveys. First of all, we've been working on this file for many, many years now. I have colleagues here with me who worked on these issues for several years, and we wanted to ensure that what we were doing was in alignment with legal requirements. So that meant we had to help institutions ensure that they were able to do so. So we conducted workshops. We developed a series of tools to help them do so. And when Mark gave you the example of what they were doing in their colleges earlier, they provided mandatory training, which includes a quiz, and the quiz has to be taken until the person reaches 100% success rate. It's not like quizzes in schools or tests where 60% is enough to pass. So we take it very seriously. Never forget that amongst our members are authors. Yes, that's why I was asking you the question. Yes, so it's very, very important for us. It's very important for us to be respectful. We're respectful. We feel respectful of creation because these people are creators. Just one last quick question, because here the other witness was saying that there was no competition between the two. So you're saying thousands of people are benefiting from this 2012 exception clause, and what do you think about this notion that there's no competition? I'm not sure I understand your question. What I can tell you is that we're spending more. So as far as I'm concerned, that answers the question. And I see that what it is we're discussing at the other end of the table is that we have to take into account, and I believe that Mr. Longfield was talking about it, we must take into account the fact that the importance of the supply chain. So we're just looking at two aspects right now. How much is being spent, how many people are spending, and how many people are receiving. I myself am an author. I've published in the past. And when I discovered, I'm so sorry, I must cut you off. I was envious of the 10%. I'm sorry, but you've gone way over your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Owens, you've advocated for a change to the system now, and if we don't get to that change, as I was mentioning to Mr. DeGen prior to this round, what would be, I've heard, again, you noted the copyright board as a potential, but what would be the things to prioritize in the interim? So if there's a concern that's being expressed now, even as this committee goes about its process, are there things that should be done under the current, administration of the law that's been put in place that would be helpful at this time?
There have been some mentioned, but I would add one. I think that the Government of Canada has significant financial leverage in the post-secondary sector in particular. I know that as a publisher that if I apply for public funding, I'm asked to demonstrate that I'm paying contributors to publications properly. I have to demonstrate that my royalty account is up to date and that it's auditable. I think that it's reasonable to suggest that if the Government of Canada wants the post-secondary sector to relicense, that it could make that a condition of funding, and I'd recommend that.
Okay. And just to follow up with regards to the Copyright Board, and I want to make sure that there is consensus here for that. If the current Copyright Board structure was one where the decisions were made in a relatively more prescribed time frame, predictable time frame, maybe that's the best, a predictable time frame, and the decisions from the Copyright Board were enforced, would that be something that would be a preferred step forward? It seems to what we're hearing from not only yourselves but other witnesses is it seems like it's an anomaly to understand when a decision will take place, and then there seems to be some lack of clarity about what takes place after the decision. So I'll start with Mr. DeGen, maybe, and go across the board, and I won't. And if you, Mrs. Emia, if you want to add something, then you can with the remainder of my time, because you were cheated earlier.
So thanks again for the question. Enforcement first is what I would say. If we're talking about options, enforcement or speed it up, we have decisions done. We have decisions on the books that are not being paid. There's at least in one only there's $9 million a year that is not being paid to our sector by the educational sector. This is a tariff that has been decided by the Copyright Board. So yes, we need enforcement right away.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards or Mr. Roll?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll just add the point that the Copyright Board's well down the road from licensing. In an ideal relationship, if the right incentives and the right sanctions are in place, we'll be back at the table any time. Literally, I will travel anywhere in the country to work towards negotiated licenses. That's the preference. If we can't reach agreement on a negotiated license that matches payment to value, the Copyright Board is a really important backup.
So I would say that one of the main things is that any decisions that are made would not be retroactive. So a decision would be made and then carried forward, but it can't be expected to go back 3 or 4 years and apply what that decision is. And the second point is that if there is a tariff regime, that the tariff regime should be optional, because there are many other sources. We mentioned that you can acquire information, and we pay lots of money in licensing. And so...
Okay, well, I'm really more interested in terms of if the current model that's operating. I'm not asking you to change the model of the Copyright Board.
Okay.
Do you subscribe to its current operational methods if, A, it would be a quicker turnaround in terms of decision-making process, and would you live or abide by the decisions of it? If you don't, that's okay. It's not a... But I'm trying to get in a sense as to whether or not that structure is something that can be used in the interim or should be something else.
Okay. I think there do need to be more resources put toward it and to make it more efficient, which has already been mentioned. Yes,
okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Change the interrogatory process to make it shorter and less burdensome. And Mark may have another example.
Well, I guess you don't want to speak to the issue of the mandatory tariff at this point, no?
No, you can maybe... Sure, I'm out of time. Okay. Yes. Maybe you can make that as submissions later. I'm just trying to get a general idea here, though, as to whether or not, at least if a starting point, as we go about this process, there's probably some fixable items that perhaps could happen, and that's all I'm looking for now.
One of the things is that there needs to be how do you say that in English? Compliance between the Copyright Acts and the Accessibility Act. This is a must.
And I'm glad you added that. As a former job developer on behalf of persons with disabilities, America Trust Treaty is only good if actually it relates to a product at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah.
On the Copyright Board, so I think one of the things that we would look for is regarding the interrogatories, if the interrogatories only applied to the institutions before the board.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We've got 2 minutes left for Mr. Bayless.
A couple of clarifications, one question. Ms. Owens, when you say that the percentage of profit has increased, I would like just to point out, I'd rather have 9% profit on $1 million of sales as opposed to 10% profit on 100,000. So it's a nice number to throw out, but it's actually meaningless unless you have the actual profit amounts. The percent of profit can go up, but the actual profits can go down radically. So point that out. Et Madame Amiot, aussi sur cette question de 70%.
As to this issue of 70% of your institutions that pay the same amount or more, I'd like to emphasize the fact that I'd like to know what Canadian creators are being paid. So perhaps you're paying more to German content creators, I don't know. But I'd like to know what the numbers are for Canadian content creators.
Can you elaborate just a bit on that, please?
Just bear with me.
So Australia has a statutory license in place. So all schools are licensed. That rate is negotiated between the educational institutions and the sector. The current rate for K-12 schools, just as an example, is close to $17 per full-time equivalent, and that rate's been in place since 2012, with that revenue being redistributed back to rights holders.
And is that for Australian rights holders or outside of Australia? As well?
They have a reciprocal agreement with Canadian copyright collectives. So some of the revenue that Glenn mentioned earlier that is coming to Canadian rights holders from foreign sources would come from Australia if Canadian content is being used in those.
So Australia
schools.
made these certain levels of charges per grade, is that what I understand? And then there's a collective that drives it back to Australian and foreign writers as well?
Yes. So there's a rate for the equivalent of K-12 schools here, and then a rate for post-secondary institutions.
Now, do they have a fair? Quick question, last one. Do they have a fair dealing carve out as well that works, or they don't have one? What
they
do? They
do.
have?
So fair dealing for education is in place, but in a licensed context.
Would that work for the libraries or the institutions? This Australian model?
Well, the Australian model also has a fair use as
That's
well.
what I'm saying. So would
it's
it work?
it's a broader interpretation because it's such as. So it would be broader than the current fair dealing exceptions in Canada. So if we're moving to a broader fair dealing environment, libraries would be very supportive of it.
So that would be something we should investigate more than.
I think with the licensing, we'd be very cautious about it because I think with public institutions in Canada, this is public money. I think we have to have due diligence and we are coming from a history where we paid twice for materials. And so part of this is reconciling that we're not
I understand
paying.
that, but what is it worth from your perspective, is this Australian model something we should investigate more?
Well, I think with the fair dealing and the fair use, yes, if it's broader, not regarding the licensing.
Madame Amiot, CG.
I won't add anything. Victoria mentioned it.
No, please do.
The Canadian tariff in place for K-12 is less than $2.50 per full-time equivalent. So there is a lot of room between there and $17 to talk about what's included in a license or in a tariff. And we're in business. We're ready to talk.
Merci. Thank you.
Excellent. On that note, I would like to thank our panel for witnesses for coming in today. You've been all very respectful with one another and given us some interesting points of view that we are going to need as we continue further down this path. So I thank you for coming in today and your contribution, and I thank everybody else, and we are adjourned.